me some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch, Michael Byler.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Homicide Sergeant Bill Cannon. And with me tonight, below me here, is retired NYPD Sergeant and professor at Albertus Magnus College in New Haven, Connecticut, Michael Geary. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you, Bill.
And the other window up top is retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
I'm doing pretty good, Billy. How about you?
Very good. You know, we're supposed to have Jennifer Coffindaffer, and she was here. She had a little bit of technical difficulties. I hope she makes it back into the room because she's a fantastic guest, and we're looking forward to hearing what she has to say about this case.
Absolutely.
Without further ado, it's been 37 days since this horrific quadruple murder. And we've heard a lot of, theories about it. And we've heard, as I describe people on the broadcast news as talking heads, and I even describe myself as a talking head when I go on TV. There's a lot of opinions out there, but we as the general public, we don't know what's going on the inside of this investigation. And one of the most important things about a homicide investigation is something called victimology. And specifically, if you remember your studies at school, ology, and here's Jen Coffindaffer. Jen, welcome to the show.
She is.
Can you hear me, Jen? Jen, can you hear me?
I can hear her.
Well, I'm going to continue.
Sadly, cannot hear you.
You can't hear me.
We hear you.
Oh.
We can hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me, but I
Yes.
can't hear you.
But
Perfect.
you can listen to us on your phone. And
Do you have recommendations?
I'm gonna remove you and bring you back in. That sometimes helps.
Boy.
Can you hear now?
Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Maybe if you go completely out and then come back in.
She's not hearing you, Phil. Folks, so anyway, we're going to get back to the show. Jennifer's going to have to figure this one out. What we're looking at is victimology, and that's a study of the victim. And what does that entail? That entails a total victim background check. That means her friends, her family, her fellow students, alcohol and drug use, boyfriends, girlfriends, vehicles you own, financial situation, habits, whether you work out, all kinds of things that have to do with your personality. And that's the study, the victimology, the study of the victim. And usually 9 times out of 10, the information that you garner from the victimology will help solve the case. In this case, it's even more difficult because we have to do 4 complete victimologies because there's 4 victims. So is that complicate matters? You bet. We're hearing things about there was potentially stalkers. So far, the Moscow police have not been able to verify that there were any stalkers. However, people in the neighborhood are swearing that they were being stalked. So we don't know whether that's true or not. I'll play some video
Sorry,
later on.
I cannot hear you all, and I do not know why.
Jen,
She can't hear us, Bill.
Yeah, I know. You got to check her speaker or something. I don't know.
Let me see.
Could it be? Well, I can't even tell how.
Yeah, she
volume.
can't. I'll tell it to. Anyway, I don't want to destroy the show.
Bill, let me just make a comment about the victimology. I'm so glad that we're on this topic tonight. And I think the reason that I'm glad about it is because I'm hearing all different talking heads, whether it be on cable news, the local news, whatever. They're coming up with all different scenarios. And I just want to make one thing clear. This, to me, sounds like a complete and total rage A rage took place in that house. I believe that one or two of the victims were targeted. And I also believe that the other two victims were collateral damage. I doubt very highly that someone from the inner circle, when I mean the inner circle, a very close boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, something of that nature, I don't think that that's going to be what's going to wind up being the perpetrator in this case. The reason I say that is I feel too much time has passed. If it was someone very close to the victims, I really believe they would have already been identified as a suspect and arrested. I believe the outer circle, let's say, someone that did know their way around the victim's home or had some connection to the victims. I doubt very highly that this was 100% random, that someone just picked this house. They seem to have known their way around the lay of the home. They were in and they were out, with apparently not being stopped or spotted. So again, I think the victimology is going to be key at this point. Finding out friends, family members, lovers, ex-lovers, things of that nature. And then we have to narrow down on, obviously, the evidence that's recovered from inside the location.
Jennifer, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad your sound is
We
working.
got it back.
What we're focusing on right now is the victimology, because I think we've gotten away from that. Sometimes it seems to me that the media is trying to dictate this investigation, the direction it goes, and they're not happy with this. I don't give a shit if they're happy about anything. The police run the investigation, the police, the FBI, and the Idaho State Police. I mean, when you watch these interviews, they show their disdain, like they're running the investigation. I'm sorry, I'm going on a rant, Jennifer. That's just my personality. Would you please comment on victimology?
Well, I want to say this. I think it is very important that very early on, and when I say early on, I mean within the first couple of days, they had the FBI there, the behavioral science unit there, to specifically outline and detail a profile of exactly what police should be looking for. And I think the Moscow Police Department made a brilliant move asking BAU to come, and then also involving federal and state officers very early on, understanding the magnitude of what they were facing. So I believe that those victim profiles that were developed by BAU are going to be very helpful. I can name 3 cases right off the bat that personally I reached out to our behavioral science unit, and unbelievable. They matched spot on who ended up being the victim. You know, when you don't have any leads, or not leads, when you do not have a suspect, that's what you need.
You know, Jennifer, I think that's a great thing to have behavioral analysis, but it's not an exacting science. It definitely does help, because there's things in this case that homicide investigators rarely see. First of all, most homicide investigators never see a quadruple murder unless it's by gunfire, and that's a hell of a lot different than someone getting killed in their home, in their beds with a knife. Professor Geary, would you like to comment on victimology?
Well, the victimology is an important aspect of the crime, because if you can find out fairly quickly what are the behavioral aspects of the 4 people involved. If it's 1, it's much easier. As you say, 4, it complicates things tremendously. But to find out information about those 4 kids that their parents didn't know about, what were their habits? What did they smoke? What did they drink? Who do they hang out with? Not everything is known by the parents, and maybe not even 1 or 2 close friends. Getting to know the victims as much as possible. Who were they like? What did they do? Who do they hang out with? Every possible bit of information you can get to understand your victims will help to lead you possibly to the perpetrator, because in victimology, there is a relationship in some ways between the victim and the perpetrator.
Absolutely. You know, a lot of people are talking about the toxicology coming back, and what is that going to tell us about this? And people, with absolutely no evidence at all, they're saying this could have been a drug deal gone bad. And, I don't see that. And that's why we look into the victimology. Were any of these kids drug users? I don't know, but the toxicology potentially will tell us that The toxicology is going to tell us what we know about almost every college student in this country. They drink, and they get drunk and they come home.
They were
And-
coming from a bar, so I guess
Right, they were coming from a
that's
bar
a gimme
and
at
they
this
were
point.
coming from a party. But we spoke about it ad nauseum about the very personal nature of someone killing with a knife. And I think I was reading some of the statistics about methods of murder, and 11% of all murders are caused by someone using a knife. So it is somewhat unusual as compared to other weapons, and it tells us something about the perpetrator. Jen, would you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. This was a very personal. I know some people don't like to use the word personal because they say, well, that makes it look like the victim had an issue and that's what made it personal. I don't mean it that way. How I mean it is the person who perpetrated this crime was angry, was enraged. We have all seen people stabbed. I've seen people stabbed many times, and they're not stabbed with the type of ferociousness that occurred in this crime, where you see 4 dead people as a result of the viciousness of the stab wounds, and probably also the location of the stab wounds that caused this amount of bleeding to exit the house, exit the caulking and go down the side of the house. You're talking serious arterial bleed. So I would believe, the neck was attacked, the heart, and we've also heard descriptions now of some of the knife wounds. So clearly this was ferocious. This was personal. And they weren't going to leave there without those victims being dead.
So again, ad nauseum, does this mean someone, and I've heard numerous FBI profilers speak upon this, does this mean someone was specifically targeted? Or as I think it was Greg McCrary, who I thought was the most impressive person, former FBI profiler that I've seen on any show so far. And he said, no, it doesn't mean that. It could mean that this person resisted the most. And as a result of resisting the attack, received much more severe wounds than the other. But absent that, it potentially could mean that this person was the target. Phil.
Real quick, Bill, you talked about the toxicology. I think the only thing the toxicology is going to tell us at this point is if there was drugs or alcohol in the system of the victims. It's not going to really make a big difference. I mean, if their senses were dull, that could be, some of the reason why they may not have put up a fight. Perhaps they were in a deep sleep when they were attacked. But I don't think that's going to be a big factor in solving this case. As far as what Jennifer just talked about, I was saying it earlier, it's a personal of nature because you have to get up close to a person to stab them. It's obviously an intense rage here. I had a triple homicide where one of the victims that was killed, the targeted individual, when we found the motive out, had a much more severe stab wound pattern than the other 2 victims who were collateral damage. They were only killed, and this came from the perpetrator's mouth, because they were in the apartment. They had a lot of time. They staged a crime scene. Now, that's a completely different case, but there was specific things in that murder that obviously told us that the mother of the 2 children was targeted. It turned out to be the son that killed the mother. And there were different things that happened when we went to that crime scene that we were able to read the crime scene, and we were able to determine before we had the confessions that the mother was targeted. So again, those are the things that they're going to be looking at. And as far as the inside of that home, there's going to be some trace evidence from the perpetrator in this case. I will almost guarantee that. I've heard earlier today on one of the talking heads on cable news saying that they're upset that there's no evidence been found in the apartment. We don't know that. That has not been said, and I doubt very highly that that's true.
I want to just talk about, I think we all, well, I'm not going to say all because nothing is ever all. We all can't agree that, the sun is out when it obviously is. But I want to give a little bit of a profile of who this person is. Again, I would say 80% of the time, by statistics, it's going to be a male. I think in my mind, in this case, I don't think there's any doubt that this is a male. Jennifer, we all 4 for 4. So we all agree.
Agree on that.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, I was just saying we can wholeheartedly agree on that. And I also wanted to comment, they have over 100 submissions that they've submitted to the lab in this case from that house. So we know there's a lot of evidence they have. The biggest problem they're going to have is this is such a party house with all these people going in and out.
Mhm.
Sometimes the victims weren't even in the house and there were huge parties held. So it's going to just be hard, in my opinion, the whole comparison issue.
I was talking about early on that they do elimination DNA and elimination fingerprints to separate potential people that had reason to be there prior to this event to people that had no reason. Although we can't say that because this killer could have been in the house as a friend or a known person to these victims, and we don't know that. So what we're hoping is, and I talk about the smoking gun piece of evidence, is commingled blood with the victim's blood that's unidentified, and that's your perpetrator. Professor Geary.
Yeah, I think the issue of the fact that it was a fairly open kind of party house atmosphere really makes it difficult. If you're involved with a homicide in an apartment or a home where maybe 4 or 5 people have access to the home on a regular basis, and you can kind of figure out, who a stranger would be, you can take the elimination prints and you can take a sample of DNA, and it would be anything that stands out as not being a member of the family or a close friend allowed into the home. You could consider them a suspect. In this situation, you might have fingerprints that the suspect may have left weeks ago. Fingerprints, if left unattended and not subject to heat and humidity and any kind of wiping away, they might last actually several weeks. I was, as Phil and I were talking before we began the show, we're just commiserating about what's the person's motive and that what their training might be. I always like to think about is it possible that the perpetrator could be someone who is fairly close in terms of physical distance in the vicinity, that they're not from far away, that there actually are someone very local that maybe can walk around in almost like hiding in plain sight, a very young person, not some sort of Hannibal Lecter person, just a young man that actually lives right in the neighborhood, who might still be just sitting around in that neighborhood and may not have actually drove away.
Mike, I had 100% early on in this case said that the perpetrator is what I would refer to as a townie.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the most admirable term, if that's the correct word, but I went to State University, Buffalo State College, and people that went to the SUNY system, the folks that lived in the town, they referred to them as townies.
Yeah.
And I think this guy is a male white, and I think somehow 1 or 2 or 3 of these girls really enraged this guy and somehow enraged him. And this rage he carried around with him. And on this night of November 13th, it was payback time in his mind, which is a psychotic thing, but it was payback time.
Billy, I just want to make a quick comment about the crime scene. Now, I think we're all in agreement for a perpetrator to have gone into that location, killed 4 people with a knife, and not have left trace evidence. The only way that could be possible, and even then with a complete Tyvek suit, he would have been spotted in the street coming out of there. Even then, if one of the victims touched his face, which a Tyvek suit would cover everything except the face, you could get DNA evidence off of their hands, which were bagged. So I think it's almost an absolute that some type of evidence from the perpetrator was left at that scene. Is with regard to the town.
If there was resistance, what we would expect to find is DNA under the fingernails of the resistors, and so far we don't know about that. If there is DNA underneath the fingernails of the people that resisted, we don't know about it. Jennifer?
No, we don't know that there is. We know that it's been described that at least 2 of the victims, I believe, had defensive wounds, but you and I both know, all of us know that can mean this, that can mean this. It doesn't necessarily mean fighting. I think the biggest issue here is they were truly ambushed as they slept. And they weren't just asleep on a normal night. They had been out all night. They'd been out until, all hours of the morning. at this point. I think that's where the toxicology will at least play a role in understanding the level of intoxication that they were under and how these attacks could occur without more of a resistance, without the two bottom the ladies downstairs hearing anything. We all know how quickly this happens. It's in seconds. And with somebody with that kind of ferociousness attacking, that blade, I think, would have gone clean through. And if it hits a lung, if it hits the esophagus, the eye area, it's over that quick.
Jennifer, you're 100% right. And I've heard talking heads on TV say, how could there be no screaming? Well, dude, you ever have a 12-inch knife stuck into your heart? You're not going to really, you're not going to scream. It's over, And so, right, when we analyze, and we're not privy to the autopsy report. When we work a homicide in the NYPD, we get the entire report. We get everything, the picture of how and where the person was stabbed. We don't have this. Do the investigators have this? Undoubtedly. So this tells a great deal. I know, a lot of the things that we're talking about is repetitive, but we're looking for answers, and in this case and in this internet world, this social media world we live in, a lot of things have to be investigated that 25 years ago, 30 years ago would have never come to the attention of the investigators. Some of it's good. A lot of it's total horseshit, and they have to waste their time going over this. So, I know, Jen, the FBI has some kind of internet tool that they use to separate the tips as to what is good and what is potentially nonsense. I don't know what that's called. Maybe you could tell us what that is.
Well, we have a tool which is utilized by our analysts. And the interesting thing about this case, which I haven't seen done, maybe the Boston Marathon case, possibly, where you have multiple field offices involved throughout the United States because they had 22,000 cars to look through. And so they ferreted that out by reports to the different field offices, to their analytical group, to go through each of those cars. And, those analysts, this is what they do. They do have special programs to input different information and read out certain words. And they're doing a great job triaging, I have no doubt, so that the boots on the ground can be headed in the right direction.
Absolutely. I don't think, sometimes I say in these homicide investigations, more is not always better. And if you have a focused team of investigators, as long as you have enough, you need enough, because too little is also just as bad as too many. Sometimes they'll throw people. When we used to have a huge case in Manhattan, they would send detectives from all over the city. And after a while, we couldn't even control the amount of personnel we had there, So it's almost better when you have a smaller, focused group of people that all know the case. Professor Mike.
Yeah, the difficulty with people wanting to help is the fact that you're getting a lot of chaff and only a little bit of wheat. The Boston Marathon bombing was an exception because the information they got on video was fabulous, was first rate, and they were able to, within probably 24 hours, I think, of going through all that information, were able to identify the Tsarnaev brothers, actually see them with their backpack, right there. And that was a wonderful thing. But the issue for the police on this case is, if you're sending in like 1,000 tips over the course of a month or however many they actually have, you have to go through as many as you possibly can. A defense attorney will try to make a lot of hay over the reliability evidence that was given, the witnesses that the police looked at, and be able to say, look, you only went through 10% of the tips. The other 90% you didn't even bother going through. And it adds an extra burden onto an already burdened police department. Remember, there's 4 victims. It was bad enough if it was 1, but you have 4. And it's just incredible.
10,000 tips right now.
How many?
Yep.
10,000.
Oh, that's
right. So they can't possibly, I think, do a real good investigation on every single one of those tips.
No.
Undoubtedly, many of them they just have to put aside and say, no, that's not credible. You know,
Right.
people probably even name people that you know. I've seen the tips log in homicide cases, and 95% of them are just garbage. That's a French word for garbage, you know. So
A lot of times people are calling up on neighbors that they don't like and different
Mhm.
things like that. But I would think in this investigation, since there is a lot of manpower there, the FBI, the state police, the local police, perhaps the main investigators that are following the evidence where it's leading them, and then maybe a separate group that's handling the tips. Obviously, some of the tips are going to have priority if they make sense. Bill, you just pointed it out. Some of them are going to be ridiculous. It's going to be, like I said, neighbors fighting or different things like that. So they're going to have to be able to, and maybe Jen talked about it. They have the analysts will have some type of a computer program that can figure out what is going to be, going to have meat on the bone and what's going to be something that's completely nonsense.
with that in mind, I just want to play this video about there was a white Hyundai Elantra that was abandoned in Oregon, Eugene, Oregon. And again, they have to follow this up as they should. But let me just play this.
Here on Law and Crime, and we have some news to tell you about in the case of the 4 University of Idaho students who were murdered a little more than a month ago, just over 5 weeks ago. There is a photo or a group of photos floating around on the internet, and I've received a lot of messages about this. It is a white Hyundai Elantra in this photo and photographs without license plates and front end damage that has been found abandoned on a street corner in Eugene, Oregon. Now, we all know that Moscow police have been looking for a white Hyundai Elantra. I reached out to police in Eugene, Oregon, and they told me that they have notified Moscow police about this white Hyundai Elantra. It has no license plates, it appears to be dirty, and also has front end damage. I reached out to Moscow PD. A spokesperson there told me they are aware of the vehicle and they are working on it. So this is an interesting bit of information. Obviously, there are 22,000 white Hyundai Elantras between the years of 2011 and 2013 that police are sifting through in the hopes of finding the white Hyundai Elantra that they're looking for. You may recall just about 2 weeks ago, Moscow PD put out the call saying that they were looking for a white Hyundai Elantra between the years of 2011 and 2013 that was in the immediate area of the crime scene that early morning on November 13th, when those 4 college students, Kaylee Gonsalves, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were murdered in their home. Police have repeatedly said that the person or persons in that vehicle could have information critical to this investigation. So they really want to talk to those people and have been searching for this vehicle for a couple of weeks. We don't know if the white Hyundai abandoned on that street corner in Eugene is indeed the vehicle. However, we thought we should let you know that police are looking into it, both the Eugene PD and Moscow PD, which is leading this investigation with the assistance of the FBI and Idaho State.
So at the very least, they'll have to go check that car out. I would think forensically process it to see if there's blood and fiber evidence. Chances are that that vehicle is stolen. And but if there is physical evidence, blood evidence, trace evidence, then obviously they should, even though it's a needle in a haystack, 22,000 Hyundai Elantras. What is the chance? But you can't say, oh, what's the chance? You got to go check it out.
If that car is stolen, I'd want to go to the location where it was stolen from, see if there's video cameras. Perhaps if the perpetrator of this quadruple homicide was responsible for stealing that car, then you'd have some type of a video of him. Obviously, a lot of other things. You want to make a connection between that vehicle, where it's located, and you want to have some type of a connection to the victims or in the area where the victims were killed. Obviously, they're going to have to follow that up, and I'm sure it's already been done.
Absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you like real crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're in the right place, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button. It's free. Give us a thumbs up and ring that bell. If you want to contribute to us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. And if you see the folks with the green font, they're part of our YouTube family. And as much as they love us, we love them more, if that's possible. But so much about this case is, I would say, for this town and this small police department, and I'm not in any way disparaging them, but it's uncharted territory. It's a first. I think their last homicide in Moscow, Idaho, was 7 years ago, and that you can't make light of that. I said a couple of times on other broadcasts that policing and law enforcement is one of the only professions that 70 to 80% of your training is on the job. You actually take the job with no experience, and people teach you how to do it. Professor Geary, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, in a case like this with a small town, if it was a single homicide and they haven't had one in 7 years, they could probably handle that without a lot of, manpower assistance from anyone else. With this kind of homicide with 4 victims, they obviously, thankfully, reached out immediately. And in a small town, the police officers who are first on the scene, as you know, we've all been there, they're critical to preserving that crime scene as best you possibly can. And that's where, as you talk about, experience comes in handy. When you've gone to a number of homicides as a patrol officer, as a patrol sergeant, and then you later on in your careers, you go on as a detective, you know what's happened before that, what the patrol officers are looking for, what they have done, what the patrol sergeant has done. In this kind of case, you might have officers, this might be the first time, and not, again, not to disparage anybody, this might be the first time they've actually seen an actual homicide, crime scene. And at that point, they might not actually know what to do because no one's actually taught them. And that makes it very difficult, because then as you come in as an investigator, an hour later, you're not exactly sure what protocols they have followed.
Well,
Absolutely. Jennifer, I just wanted to frame a question toward you. The FBI is famous for being tight-lipped, and I think they brought that to this investigation. I think in this investigation, that is the way to go. I think you gotta withhold a lot of information, but it's causing a lot of frustration with both the families of the victims and with the public. Would you comment on that?
it's causing so much frustration, but it's actually a little bit, I don't know how else to say it, but bothersome to me. It amazes me that people think that they're entitled to know what's going on in this case. They're really not. The police, their allegiance are to the victims. That is their allegiance, to solve this case, and then to also, obviously, the local police to keep that community safe, because there is a murderer on the loose. But I so embrace all the sleuths out there and all the people interested in this case, because but for them, in the case of Gabby Petito, as an example, it might never have been solved because they keep the information out on social media, mainstream media. They keep the interest going and the different theories going. And I think that that is, so important. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, but it's important that this case stay out there, because as you all know, there's so many people who don't even know about this case still. Only crime buffs, newsies, we know about it. But your average Joe out there, and I know this because I was just with a group of kind of average, about 2 of them even knew anything about it. And they were saying, now what happened over in Idaho? Right. Everybody doesn't know about it, and we need to keep the word out.
Jen, I think you hit it on the head. That's a double-edged sword. I think you have to be skilled as a department in what to release, how much to release. And I think you should play the media like they're a Stradivarius violin, because the media can be your very best friend and your very best enemy. And once you realize that, but skilled departments, large departments are skilled. In New York, the press is so powerful. And in my opinion, the NYPD gives way too much information to them.
I agree.
I've compromised cases with what they give these guys. I had one time was told we had 3 perpetrators in a murder identified, and DCPI called me that morning and said, and asked me how the case was going. I said, good. We're going out to get all three of them. We have their names. And they said, yes. I go, what do you mean, yes? He says, what's their names? I said, I'm not giving it to you. And this little weasel detective hands the phone to an inspector who gets on the phone and starts screaming at me about, who are you to withhold them? Blah, 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 blah. I said, oh, I thought real fast. And I said, a chief who outranked him told me not to tell you. I made that up on the spot with my skills, my bullshit.
I've involved higher ranks in my time on the job as well when I met resistance. But listen, the obligation of the investigators in any homicide, regard to the family, the obligation is, listen, you want to keep them in the loop. You want to keep them in a friendly manner, but you can't tell them everything. Cause again, a family member could go talk to people in the news or talk to people in the media, or just say it to general friends or relatives, and it gets out there. And we would not want to compromise critical information on any case that might stymie a prosecution down the line. So again, Bill, you talked about it many times. There was a case where the Night Stalker wears a specific pair of shoes he wore, and he left a nice footprint. It was given out to the media, and he threw the shoes away. So again, we don't want anything like that. There needs to be a liaison. I've called for this early on between the family and the police department, someone that both parties are going to trust, maybe a lawyer, and they could, kind of like balance it out. And listen, the family needs to, I get it. They're frustrated. They lost their children. Can't even imagine what they're going through, but we all have to stay on the same page. That's the key. Everyone regarding the families and law enforcement has to be on the same page.
Well, Phil, with that in mind, the family did hire a lawyer, and he went on News Nation the other night with Chris Cuomo.
Good.
And I'm going to play a little bit of this. And Chris Cuomo, he doesn't look the same on News Nation as he looked on CNN.
On Idaho, before the break, we saw exclusive video of the house where the 4 victims in the Idaho murder case lived. And now we've got the full video where 2 of the victims, Kaylee and Maddie, were walking with the infamous guy in a hoodie they call Adam. I guess technically it's not fair to call him infamous, but the guy in the hoodie that they say has been cleared, we don't understand why. Here to help us figure this out is Kaylee Gonsalves.
You know something? He puts a lot of editorial remarks in his comments. He did that in 2 sentences. He said infamous, and then he said in Adam. We don't know why he's. Well, you're not entitled to that. You're a journalist. No one has to tell you anything.
Family attorney Shannon Gray. Counselor, thank you for being back.
Thanks for having us.
Let me play this new piece of video. Now, do you think they're talking about the guy they're walking with, or they're talking about somebody else named Adam, and they're referring to some conversation with that guy, right?
We had seen the video. The family had seen the video over a week ago, probably. That appears to be video that was before the food cart video that came out. Mm-hmm. The person they're walking with is the same person, I think, that was at the food court, behind them at the food court. And Adam, I believe, was just, the way that I understand it, Adam is just a bartender that at the corner bar that where they had just been. So I think it's pretty simple.
So that was just some extraneous reference. But this guy that enters the picture, and he's there with them again at the food truck, he was very quickly cleared. You're okay with that decision?
Well, I mean, the reality of the situation is that you have to try to trust the investigation. They've made a lot of decisions about potential people that they might be interested in and clearing them. And I think we all know that the idea that you might clear someone initially and then maybe gather evidence later on and might revisit that person is always open to an investigation. So as of right now, it sounds like they've cleared that individual. And that's really the only information that we have.
But good point. Being cleared means nothing. And sometimes it is used as a tactic. You're right. Now that goes to a level of savvy by investigators. The man running this case is relatively young, is he not?
Yeah, it's my understanding that when we went into the meeting on Monday, the investigators were there, the 2 lead investigators. One of them identified himself as, I think, an Officer Brett Payne, and the other one was an Idaho State Trooper, an Officer Gilbertson. Officer Payne is a rookie as of 2020. I think he has 2 years of experience on the Moscow Police Department. And so After that meeting, we went and I sent an email, I think it was 4 or 5 days ago, asking for, some experience. I think specifically the credentials of Officer Payne. They put him as lead investigator on a quadruple homicide.
And
no response.
hey, thank you for.
Wow, that's pretty concerning that someone with 2 years as a cop is the lead investigator. That's very concerning, I mean, it took me years and years to learn the trade, and I was a boss, and I had, before I got into homicide, I was on the job for 17 years, and I had 6 or 7 years in the detective bureau, and it's not a given. There's a huge learning curve. So it's the first time I was hearing that I knew that the person that had the case was inexperienced, but I didn't know that inexperienced. Jen?
Well, I took a little hit on Twitter today because, I addressed that point. And my point was, I'm going to say it again. The reality of a case like this is the 60 FBI agents that are assigned and the, multitude of analysts in the FBI and the clerical staff. So, I don't know the exact number, but I'm guessing in the hundreds are working on this from the FBI. And they're not taking their directions from the kid with 2 years of experience. We all know this. This is a combined effort. The Idaho State Police are heavily involved in this as well. And you're going to have a case agent from each department, and they're all going to get together, once, maybe twice a day. But who is really running the day-to-day operations and the investigative trajectory on a day-to-day basis, in my opinion, is the FBI.
No, absolutely. And I could tell, even listening to the bosses, the Captain Lanier and Chief, they're inexperienced too. I can hear it in their voice. I can hear it in what they say when they're interviewed. They don't, I don't want to disparage them, but I'll put it this way, they're inexperienced at this. And obviously, how could they be experienced at one murder in 7 years? And after, with that one, when was the one before that? This isn't something you learn through osmosis. You got to actually do this type of work to get good at it, Phil.
Yeah, but Jen just made a great point. It's something that I always say. I've said it maybe on 100 shows already. One detective does not solve the case. It's a team effort from the beginning, from the first phone call, from the first officer that responds. So that detective being assigned to case, the case detective is a little bit concerning, 2 years on the job, whatever it may be. However, like she said, there's 60 FBI agents, plus you have every asset within the FBI working on this case if they need DNA evidence examined, whatever the case may be. Then you also have the state police. I am certain that there are very experienced and qualified investigators on this case. Him being the lead investigator, he was the detective assigned. It's not a real concerning thing. I mean, I would like to have had someone with a lot of experience in homicide investigation being a lead investigator, but with all the help that's there and all the people working on this case, I doubt it's going to really play in, not capturing the criminal, the person that's responsible for the quadruple homicide.
Professor Mike.
Yeah, I have to agree with Phil. And, he caught the case. He was up, he caught the case, and his name is on all the bottom of all the reports, but he's working absolutely hand in hand with the FBI and the Idaho, keep saying Oregon, the Idaho State Police. And therefore it isn't as concerning as people who are not in law enforcement may feel. They might look at this and say, well, they're like Mayberry RFD and Barney Fife is in charge. No, it's not. And that's not at all. So it doesn't. Do I wish that person had 25 years in the job, 15 of them in the bureau, and 10 of them working homicide? Yeah. But that's not the reality of that police department.
Well, I don't think anyone should even be a detective after 2 years. You should have at least 5 years on the job before you make detective. And 5 years is not a lot either.
I barely knew how to tie my shoes as an FBI agent. I got thrown in, on a substantive squad. I made so many errors, but I always say I've never learned from something I know. It's when you make that mistake and then you don't make it again. That's what the teaching points are. And
But Jen, I use this golden nugget all the time. 1,000 attaboys don't equal one shit.
that's so
You've
true.
heard that one, right? I love that one. That's my favorite saying from the NYPD.
You know what, Billy? We were kind of I don't know if you want to call it blessed, but my time on the job, I came on in 82. Bill came on right around the same time. And there was a generation before us that was teaching us. And when I went into the Bureau in 1989. There were some great detectives that worked in homicide squad and in the detective squad where I was. So again, it wasn't like somebody was leading me by the hand. I did have experience and, I had already been in a couple of shootouts and stuff. But when it came to homicide investigation, having good people around you is the key to solving the case.
All that glitters. Thank you for the $2.99 super chat. Any job you need experience. That's true. I don't want someone cutting my hair. My hair's bad enough without an inexperienced barber, right? I want him to have some experience. I want to play this video because this has garnered a lot of interest and what it impacts upon was the guy by the food truck who they're seen walking with before they get to the food truck, and the infamous Adam, who turns out to be the bartender.
Obtaining the surveillance footage, Kaylee Gonzalez's father says it shows her and Madison Mogan walking down Main Street in Moscow, Idaho, with a man whom police have confirmed is not a suspect. Their conversation caught on camera.
How did you say to Adam? I told Adam everything.
The footage submitted to authorities as part of the investigation. Kaylee's family lawyer telling ABC News they've seen it, and they also don't believe the Adam referenced is a suspect.
What were they talking about that night? Were they concerned about anything? Had anybody bothered them? These are all sort of leads that the police will have to look at.
Just moments later, with the same man less than a block away, Kaylee and Madison seen on video at a food truck at 1:40 a.m. Police have yet to name a suspect in the case and confirm that they have expanded their search for the occupants of a 2011-2013 white Hyundai Elantra like this, saying they may have critical information about the case. The car, resembling this grainy image they're now investigating, captured on a gas station security camera taken around 3:45 a.m. the morning of the murders. Gas station employees.
Jen, I just wanted to ask you about that. There's two things sort of thwarted in one instance, and the family had that video after the first week. So that would have dispelled a lot of rumors right away because they knew the food truck guy, and he was public enemy number one.
And he still is public enemy number one. If you read a lot of the social media, I can't believe they just cannot let go of him. And they just can't. Even with that video, they say, see, it proves that he was stalking them. It's so interesting when really, in my opinion, it disproves it. They were friends. They walked around. And actually, I posted the complete video from the food truck. It's over an hour long. It's very, very long. And you can see the girls leave in one direction, and you can see the guy in the white hoodie leave in the other direction. You know, he wasn't out there staking them out. He really didn't even have opportunity. And that's why I think he was cleared early. We all know an alibi is not difficult. Yes, people can lie, but in this day and age, it's not difficult. It doesn't take a lot of time, is what I should say.
I'm so glad you brought up that video, though, Jen, because if you look at that video, there's about 10 minutes of that video where you see the hoodie guy. We'll call him the hoodie guy. He's interacting with people. He was absolutely positively not stalking them. If you look at the clip that's been played on the news, it's maybe a 20-second clip where he's kind of laying in the background. That does look suspicious, but if you look at it in full context, it tells me that he is not being a stalker type or a suspicious type. He's engaging with too many people for me to believe that he was stalking them at that point, and I think that's why the police have cleared him.
You know, the other thing is that they've also just come up with another video from some store guy that says, oh, they were talking about another stalker, but he has no concrete information. He's just repeating double, triple, and quadruple hearsay. And that's where the danger is in this investigation. Of all the things, look, wouldn't it have been helpful if we had known about this video instead of everyone well, social media, they were all conjecturing that he's the killer. That's the
Right.
killer,
Right.
and there's a lot of that in this investigation because, again, we're not privy to the inside information, and rightfully so. A lot of information cannot be released, but it would help if some of the things, yeah. And the term that we get all the time, and the media goes crazy over it, is when they say, "Oh, he's cleared." Oh my God, how did you clear him? You know what I mean? He's public enemy number. If you use that language, cleared, and they come up with information later on and evidence, they can bring him back in, right? You can always bring someone back in when you have evidence. No one's ever cleared, Maybe they use the wrong language, but and no matter what, the media hung on to that. They hung on to it they're still hanging on to it.
Billy, there was one of the alleged stalkers was someone that met one of the victims in a coffee shop. They tracked that person down. They engaged the person. They interviewed them. And it turns out it was like a flirtation thing. He was trying to meet the girl. Now, with that said, if I'm the investigator, I go interview that guy, get that information. I'm also going to run his criminal history. If he's got no criminal history, I'm going to look into him, maybe look at his social media or see if he's cooperative, if he agrees to take a DNA swab, things like of that nature. All of those things were probably done. And that's probably how they got to say that person they don't believe is involved in this case as far as being a stalker. Now, that's not really a stalker. I mean, you go out on the street and, young kids, they flirt with one another. That's not really a stalker. Stalkers, if you look it up, that's someone that's following this person, maybe, tries to engage them and they're rebuffed and they continue to follow.
Right, unwanted advances that they keep pursuing it.
Exactly, exactly.
A stalker.
Yeah.
But, in this case, look, they got to look at everything. They have to. They really do. I just want to play a little bit of this recent guy who's saying she had a stalker because you guys judge it yourself.
Would both come in very happy, very friendly. They always were just such a smile on their face. Just like pretty much you would say they're the light of the world, pretty much. Always happy, go lucky. They always came in just chatting. They always came with a group. Like I said, they probably I'd say 4 or 5 girls at most all the time. They come in together. And I made a joke about it earlier. It was like, hey, coming together and stuff like that. It's nice to see you guys trying to stay safe. One of them most openly says, "Oh yeah, we've had a friend of ours be stalked before, so this is kind of why we all travel in a group like this." And was it Kaylee who said that? Do you remember? No, it was Maddie who actually said that. So Maddie said it, and it was kind of like more motioning to Kaylee too, like who was right next to her. So you could tell that like they obviously all were trying to keep Kaylee safe, and to be there for her as good friends. And then to know that a few weeks later, now I won't see them, anymore, anything like that. So it's crazy.
How long before the murder about was that?
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks beforehand, because I was telling them I hope they had a good Thanksgiving break and everything like that too, because I didn't know if I'd see them again. So, because with a lot of the times with the kids, with the way after the pandemic, some of the kids leave in waves. So I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to see you this weekend or not. Hey, hope you have a great, Thanksgiving with your family. And that was the last I saw them.
I'm just saying that whole thing is really a big nothing burger.
Exactly.
That he didn't say a lot. There was really no evidence that they were being stalked. It could be even in a conversation. Kids coming in late at night when they're drinking and they're just saying, "Oh, I don't like this guy. Yeah, he's creepy, whatever." But it wasn't a stalking. Jen?
I totally agree. That is non-evidentiary. There's nothing you could take out of that, really. It's just kind of, and I would love to see the police report of his interview, either the FD 302 or the report of interview from the state police or the local. I want to see if he got that detail. Didn't it feel like to you? And I've seen that like 3 times. Yeah, it was 3 weeks. Yeah, and then one person, I would love to see his actual report of interview, because we all know when the police are asking you a question, you're hopefully making sure to really just precisely remember what you did and said. And then this just seems to kind of go on and sort of, oh yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think that, if he was interviewed by the police, he would change up. He wouldn't have real specifics. It didn't seem very specific. I'll put it that way. Professor Mike?
Yeah, the lack of specificity, and he, saying, well, It was about 3 weeks ago. And I see them. Sometimes I see them. Sometimes I don't see them. He's well-meaning,
Yeah.
well-intentioned, and the reporter is obviously working hard to come up with some sort of, witnesses in some respect whatsoever, whatever you want to use that term, what a witness might be. But I think one of the problems with, as you mentioned earlier on, the national media seems to be driving a narrative and about stalking, and it might not really be there. And Brian Hinton's a great reporter, and he's probably working 16 hours a day. But interviews like this, if a name gets mentioned like Adam, that could be actually very dangerous for Adam. You might get somebody like Chris Cuomo now talks about him as an infamous Adam. And then,
I don't know where he got that word from.
Right.
That was like unbelievable. He's been
He caught himself with it though, too.
He brought that from CNN.
I will say that I think that's why the police withheld that stretch of conversation, because Adam is mentioned. So now you just have somebody else in the fold and it happened.
Right.
People were pointing out, oh, it must be Adam. And then you get a whole line of, a whole group of sleuths that are after Adam. So,
exactly.
It's unbelievable, the people who have been victimized that probably are not involved in this case. Other than
things take on a life of their own, Jen. And you had mentioned with Gabby Petito and the family Red, White, and Bethune. They had that video that basically was connected where the body of Gabby Petito was. Because of them, she was recovered, and it may have never been recovered, or would have taken a hell of a lot longer. So social media does help, but there's a lot of danger to it also. Like you was discussing, that they point out people who they say are suspects. All of a sudden, the people better get a bodyguard or get some protection or leave town for a while, because social media pointed them out as a suspect.
Right now, it's going on with the surviving victims. Dylan and Bethany are also another public enemy 1 and 2.
Yes.
Many people believe there's no way they could sleep through that. They slept till noon. And, it's just a matter of, I wonder how many people have even been in a fight sometimes. How fast it goes, how it's just so quick. It's dirty. It's vicious, right? It's not it's not orchestrated like you see on TV. The hand over the mouth, right? It's just not like that. And so it's just been interesting to listen to the different philosophies of sleuths.
It's so important to try to stay focused on this. And we as investigators and former investigators, retired law enforcement, are hoping for that smoking gun piece of evidence that points directly to the perpetrator in this. And I'm expecting science to solve this case. I really am. And so far it hasn't happened, but it's been 37 days. We all know it's not time to panic. It's not time to use the word cold case. It's not time to bring in the National Guard. We know that stuff can take time, and it is taking time. And let the law enforcement experts work this case methodically and do it correctly, and they'll get positive results. Mike.
Yeah, patience is the watchword here. You have 4 homicides in one location in an area that wasn't an isolated area with so many possible people, strangers, repair people, college friends, relatives, the postal delivery guy, all kinds of people are coming in and out of that house over the course of a semester. We know about the party that they had early on in the semester. And it's going to take a long time to eliminate all those extraneous people who just happened to be there weeks earlier and had nothing to do with this homicide. If they've never been fingerprinted and they've never had their DNA taken and put into a database, are going to have a lot of loose ends. And so it's going to take a lot of painstaking detective work, and the national media doesn't have the patience for that.
Well, Mike, I always say they used to call detectives gumshoes.
Yeah.
You got to wear out those gumshoes.
That's right.
You know, you got to walk around and wear them out. And now today, it's most of your work is done on the phone, right?
I
And
think with 10,000 tips, there's going to be a lot of shoes worn out. Don't worry.
yeah, absolutely. You know, I used to laugh when we were on the job when cell phones just started coming out, like in the middle 90s, I think, where everyone had to have a cell phone. And detectives, they didn't want to purchase one because it was too expensive. Then they realized, wait a minute, I got guys calling me from the street and saying my perp's on 110 in Lexington and it's making me money. So they were like, oh, I got to get a cell phone, you know? Wow, you figured that out, that could do that. You know, people calling you with tips all the time, and it leads to overtime, and it leads to, better information. Phil, why don't you go with real quick?
Joe Murray, attorney at law. Have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York area? Do you need a victim's advocate? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only an experienced trial attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of the fence. His website is jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, or you could email Joe at jmurray-law.com. And Joe is a big supporter of police off the cuff real crime stories.
Absolutely. You know, Jen, I want to, and I know you said you could only stay a half hour, and I didn't. I'm sorry. I got carried away. I kept you here. I love your mane of hair. I didn't want that to leave the screen, you know. So, but I've been trying to get you on my show for the longest time. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. I really appreciate your insight, and you know how the FBI works, and we're from the other, we're from that dirty, grimy NYPD, you know, but I don't mean that. I love the NYPD.
And 15 of my years I spent embedded in local units, so including a gang unit for 6 years. So I know better guys, and it's an honor to be here. And I thank you for asking me. And just before I sign off here, I did want to say my sincerest, deepest condolences, especially this time of year, the holidays, Christmas season, to these families. And, at the end of the day, it is about these 4 young people who never, ever should have had their lives taken. So just my sincerest condolences.
Jen, that's so heartfelt. And it's also, we sometimes, when we protect ourselves when we're in law enforcement, to have that heart out of shell, and sometimes don't allow ourselves to feel the pain of other people, especially if you work homicide all the time, because you can't go home crying every night, or bring that home with you, So, but we really do feel that these are real people, these are not just the quadruple homicide victims in Moscow, Idaho. They were real people with real families, with real friends, with real loved ones, and they had really important lives ahead of them, which has been snuffed out at this point.
Absolutely.
Schmitty, I love that Police Off the Cuff train doesn't stop at Speculation Station, keeping it focused. Always great show, great people. Schmitty, thank you for the $5 super chat. And thank you for that wonderful comment. We love our folks. We love our fans. I know some people don't like me to call them fans, subscribers, friends, Romans, countrymen. I call you whatever you'd like, but we appreciate all you guys coming to watch us. And guys, I think most of you know, because I see some people leaving right now, Duty Ron is going live with Brian Enton from News Nation, and also Ed Wallace will be there. So you got a bang up 1, 2, 3 show tonight, and I'm sure they're going to come up with some amazing stuff. And Jen, I want you to promise me that you'll come back.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. And it's such a pleasure to meet you two gentlemen.
Jen, good to meet you.
Thank you, Jen. And I watched the show that you did on Duty Run show talking about self-defense stuff. And I have 3 college-age daughters. I got them to watch it as well. And thank you very much. That was very, very good.
Oh, good. Yeah, I've made my daughter, I have a 21-year-old, and she goes through that class often. So I make her do it over and over again, and she's got it down. So
good.
Thank
Jen,
you.
that's great. I love the one the guy tried to yoke you from behind.
Yes.
Yeah, we had it staged later.
What's that?
We had that staged for later, but he decided to go off the cuff with me. So it was interesting. That was not staged. That particular.
But that was great. I mean, that's definitely a a martial art move. That some trained jujitsu, trained martial arts, moving with the person and then turning around, and it doesn't have the effect to your back of the neck that it would have to the front of your neck. That was brilliant. That was great. I think all women should take, all men too, should take self-defense courses. As we got older on the police department, we just pulled that on 9. I'm not wrestling with a 16-year-old anymore. I used to do that. Now,
but when
comes out right away.
When you practice that stuff, it becomes instinct, and I think that's the point. You spun around so quick; it was almost like your instinct. So I think that was really, really a great show. Everybody should try and catch it. And definitely some type of self-defense courses is always good to take.
Absolutely. Professor Mike Geary from Albertus Magnus, retired NYPD sergeant, got a law degree. He's got all kinds of qualifications. And Mike, thanks for coming on the show. He has no life, so whenever I call him, he's ready.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you. No problem. I'm always there for you, buddy.
Phil, it's always like I'm picking up the cannolis in Brooklyn. I'm going here to Staten Island. I'm going.
I got to get a veal pasta.
I'm going. I can never get a hold of him. He's doesn't have something to do. Well, guys, go ahead, Jen. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying thank you again.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
And be safe out there.
All right.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
One episode just ain't enough.